starting your day off with a take on Vegas you won't get anywhere else.
Hi, I'm Holly Madison, and I listen to Brian Shapiro.
Hi, this is William Shatner, and I listen to Brian Shapiro.
Hey, this is Larry the Cable Guy, and I listen to Brian Shapiro. Why? Because I'm a good American. So is he. And if you don't listen to him, you need to pack up and leave this country.
This is the Vegas Take with Sharp and Shapiro.
Come on, guys!
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. It is Vegas Take time. Your boys back at you, Sharp and Shapiro. We got a lot to get to today, a lot to talk about. You won't find a more interactive show than this one on the Vegas Take. That's right, 50,000 watts of opinions at you. You might agree, you might disagree, but we always welcome your phone calls at 257-5396. We're going to get to the Donald Trump stuff a little bit later. Oh, yeah, I got a lot to talk about with him. JD, he met with Vladimir Putin. Real great guy, right? Vladimir Putin. Fantastic man. Only an evil, murderous dictator, that's all. For an hour, they had a phone conversation today. Do you think at one point Donald Trump actually spoke with him about how the Russians interfered in our elections? Nope. We'll get to that. We will get to that coming up a little bit later on the program. We have a very special guest in studio. JD, have you ever shot a gun before?
I actually have never shot a gun before.
I did, and it was at this gentleman's store back in the day.
That's exciting.
Yeah, the former owner of the gun store joining us. He has a book out called The Reality of Armed Self-Defense. He has a YouTube show called Fired Up with Bob Irwin on guns, politics, and self-defense. None other than the man himself, Bob Irwin, joining us in studio. Bob, I appreciate you coming in. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We got a lot to talk about. And as you know, we talk about gun violence all the time, responsible gun ownership. It is a hot topic over the weekend. I'm sure you heard about this, another school shooting on a college campus. It's a tragedy. Two people lose their lives. One of them, an absolute hero who charged at the gunman and saved lives. And the question I always talk about with our listeners and with JD is, how do we stop these things from happening? Not an easy solution, right? And I want to give you my opinions, and then I want to hear what you have to say about this, because you are an expert in this field. And let me just say this once again. I'm not one of those people that goes on the air that says I'm an expert when it comes to guns. I'm not. You are. I don't know everything there is about guns. I never will. You are. So you're the perfect person to talk about this. But when I hear about gun violence, the first thing that comes to my mind is, first of all, how did this person get the gun? Is he mentally ill? We need to make sure that people that are mentally ill are not getting their hands on weapons. How do we prevent that, number one? Number two, and again, in no way, shape, or form am I saying that we should take all guns away from responsible gun owners. No. But I do think if a gun can shoot 10 to 15 times in 2 seconds, I'm not sure I want that gun to be sold to the general public. That's just my opinion on that. But number one is mental illness, and I never hear Republicans or Democrats talking about that as much as, taking guns off the streets. So, Bob, when you hear about this type of thing, when this type of tragedy happens and this maniac decides to take innocent lives like he did, I believe it's at University of North Carolina, Charlotte, what's the first thing that comes to your mind for you? Because for me, obviously, it's the victims first, and then it's, how did this person get the gun? Is he mentally ill? What type of gun was it? That sort of thing. So what comes to your mind when you hear about these tragedies?
Well, it is a tragedy, and when criminals get hold of a gun, or people who are too nuts to understand the value of human life get a hold of a gun, it is a tragedy, especially when a lot of innocent victims are injured. We look at gun violence as if the gun is responsible for the violence, rather than the gun is a tool like a hammer or a chainsaw. People are killed with chainsaws, but we don't register chainsaws. But
not at the record that people are being gunned down by by weapons as guns.
That depends on whose statistics you are reading.
You think a hammer kills more people than guns?
No,
I don't understand.
That's not what I said at all.
Okay.
But when you look at gun deaths in general, a very, very small percentage of them are mentally ill people doing mass shootings. The large bulk of, when they talk about gun deaths, the large bulk of deaths they're talking about are suicides. 2/3, roughly, of the, and it'll vary from here to there, of gun deaths are intentional gun deaths. Another large chunk of them is justifiable self-defense shootings or police shooting people who are shooting at them. That it was most of the gun death stuff is not related to and I'm not diminishing it, but the numbers are not there. We have, thousands of opioid overdose deaths. We have more children killed in drowning and bicycle accidents than with gunfire. That doesn't make the children accidentally or purposefully killed any less important, but the gun is an inanimate object. I would love to see guns out of the hands of the mentally ill. I think everybody agrees on that. The fly in the ointment, if you will, is getting the background check system nationally, and this is something supported by National Shooting Sports Foundation and the NRA, up to date, so the data of people who are prohibited is fed into the system, and we can discover. So the police officer stopping somebody on the street or finding a gun in a house where he's doing a welfare check can immediately discover that this guy is a prohibited person, and
I don't disagree
snatch
with that.
up the gun. Most cases, the problem is we don't know.
Right.
And then the additional problem with the mentally ill is the undiagnosed ones that we don't know about.
And that's a very good
they
point.
suddenly fly off the handle.
That is a good point.
And we had no idea they were going to do that.
We need to come up with a system.
The background check and would have passed the background check.
Which is wrong. We need to come up, Bob, with... And by the way, I don't disagree with anything you said.
I wish I could sit here on your show and tell the world the solution.
And Bob,
it's not an easy one.
Does that mental evaluation only take one time, or does it take multiple times over the course of a gun owner's time owning a gun?
That, as we get into the weeds on that issue, that becomes the problem. We get all the backgrounds in the system, and then we discover a guy who is mentally ill and he has a gun, and we get it away from him. Or let's say we take the theory of every time when the guy buys a gun, we'd run a background check. And at that time, of course, he is standing in the store, he's sober, he's whatever, and
he's on his best behavior.
He passes.
Right.
A psychologist, rather than a gun shop owner, trust me, I've been there with this, we can't diagnose mental illness because the guy is trying to be on his best behavior, so we don't see a red flag. And trust me, when dealers see a red flag, they don't make the sale. The liability alone is just too high, but who wants to be responsible for that?
I have to make an analogy to what you are saying. It's kind of like you're on a first date with a girl, right? You're going to be on your best behavior. Now, that woman might see some red flags. In case of myself, she sees plenty of red flags, right?
All of them.
But you get what I'm saying in that analogy. If you're on a first date with someone, usually the man is going to be a gentleman and be on his best behavior. And, because for whatever reason, he wants to impress the girl. I want to bring this up, and I want to get both of your thoughts on this. So, Tommy Lauren, as you know, is a gun advocate. She graduated at UNLV. She makes a lot of appearances on Fox News. Then we have Alyssa Milano, who talented actress, at least I think she is. She's a Democrat. She is on the left, and she is anti-gun. I think that's pretty fair to say. They both went at it on Twitter the other day, and I want to talk about this because I think it's an interesting debate. Two people on the opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to guns. So Representative Eric Swalwell, who's running for president as a Democrat, said, this was right after the shooting in North Carolina, Charlotte, okay? He said, just a one-word answer, please. How many mass shootings has Australia had since it banned assault weapons? It is fewer than the 2,031 we have had since Sandy Hook. Now, Tommy Lauren responded to that. She is a gun activist. She said, did you know Australians now own more guns in total than they did before the 1996 crackdown? I'll wait. Okay, here's where so it's getting interesting now. Two people that disagree. Alyssa Milano, Tony. Her name is Tommy, but she said Tony for whatever reason. Yes, Australia has strict gun laws, and they still own guns, and the country is safe from unnecessary gun violence. See how that works? Stricter gun laws means a safer country, and people still get to have guns if they choose. Now, here's why I think Alyssa Milano won the argument. This is how Tommy Lauren responds. I don't think Tommy Lauren is the brightest bulb in the world. That's just my opinion, okay? Now, she says, no, it means more guns equal more violence. And if you and your Democrats insist on allowing illegals to invade our country, you best believe I will exercise my First and Second Amendment rights. First of all, nobody was talking about illegal immigration. Why did she even bring up illegal immigration? That is a completely separate issue. Again, I think Tomi Lahren is a complete imbecile. I think she's an idiot, and I think the only reason why she's on TV is because of what she looks like.
She brought it up because it appeases her audience.
Of course. Thank you. Yes, I agree with that. Okay, so they get into a little cat fight, which I do find quite entertaining. I like a little, but this is a very serious issue. So, JD, let me ask you first. What do you think about that conversation, the way Tomi Lahren responded, and then we will get to Bob. What do you think about that?
Well, again, bringing up illegal immigration it's basically irrelevant, but I do agree that there needs to be consistent mental evaluations when it comes to owning a firearm, not just one.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bill, in regards to. Or I don't know. I called you Bill. Bob.
Feel free to call me Bob.
I apologize, Bob. When it comes to this, I'm confused with Bill because I'm seeing Bill Clinton on Sunday night. He's coming to town with Hillary, and I know you. I could just tell by his facial looks. I don't think he'll be going to that event. But anyway, when it comes to this specifically what Alyssa Milano said in regards to gun control, and then I want to take some phone calls on this at 257-5396. Again, the number to call 702-257-5396. What do you think about this gun debate when Alyssa Milano brings up Australia? Does she have a point?
She has a point, but it's statistically wrong. Mm-hmm. The gun violence in Australia, actually, since the Tasmania shooting, which caused all of that, has escalated. They found that the criminal gangs now in Australia are manufacturing their own cheap submachine guns. They have all sorts of crime on the highways and whatnot away from town. The bad guys have taken to laying down on the ground on highways, so they get the drivers to stop, and then they jump up and rob everybody in the car. Their crime rate, but that's not listed as a gun crime, because they only seem to think they're gun crimes when both sides are armed or some school is attacked. But they have thousands of them. You look at the data that's coming out of China and Japan, where they have all these stabbings and whatnot. They find ways, the bad guys find ways to kill people. They just do less gunfire unless the population is disarmed totally.
But how would the kid at Sandy Hook, for example, would have been able to kill all those people without the type of gun that he had?
Without any other school security there, any handgun would have done it. I mean, there's nobody to fight back. You can shoot as many people as you want.
You think with a handgun he would have been able to kill as many people as he did with the assault weapon that he had?
It's really hard to make a tactical answer to. Mm-hmm. Somebody, we're trying to psychoanalyze somebody who kills children. I mean,
I want to get to the root of Sandy
because
Hook.
if he did what he did, he murdered his mother to get the gun.
Yeah.
He broke into the safe he wasn't supposed to be able to get into.
Which I wanted to bring up.
He took a shotgun with him and an AR and used the AR. The shotgun would have probably killed more people.
He should have never had access to those weapons. She should have never had access to those weapons. And that mother, God rest her soul, but she was an irresponsible. First of all, she should have never taught that kid how to shoot a gun. The kid couldn't have even had a conversation with somebody. He was mentally ill, and she knew it. And I have a lot of anger towards her, and it cost her life and many other people because she irresponsibly taught that kid how to shoot a gun, and not only that, but he knew how to access her weapons. It was we need to talk about gun responsibility. That's very important. Look,
what you just hit is the issue.
Right,
responsible ownership and use of firearms.
Exactly. His name.
It is not a gun problem. It is a parental or societal problem. Because if we said right now we're going to take away guns from everybody, it's a couple of the presidential candidates have voiced that recently.
To take guns from everybody?
We take guns from everybody.
Nobody wants that.
And that's actually not quite true. But anyway, if we do that,
hold on. Are there any Democrats that are running for president that actually do believe that we should take the Second Amendment away from people? Because I've never heard that.
Yes, I believe Kamala Harris said that.
Kamala Harris said that.
She thinks that all guns should be taken away from people. Okay, well that's ludicrous. She's not. First of all, she's not going to be the president.
The point being is, if she does that with a presidential order within 100 days of taking office, I believe was the statement.
She's not going to
win. That wouldn't solve the problem because the gun itself is only a tool, and the criminals aren't going to line up to turn theirs in. I was living in Los Angeles when we had the first assault weapon ban, and I was on an interview show with somebody. And I'd mentioned that this was later after the assault weapon ban.
Yep.
I mentioned to the guy that I lived in Los Angeles at the time, and I went down to Parker Center, and it was amazing the line of gangbangers with their AKs and their pistols that were lined up around the block at Parker Center to turn their guns in. And the guy looked at me and said, "Did you take any pictures?" There was nobody went to Parker Center to turn in their assault rifles. Yeah. The bad guys keep them.
That's not a shocker.
You know.
Yeah.
But he was so wound into guns are bad that he thought that was it. You know, I was just being the sarcastic person I usually am.
Yeah. It's not that's not going to happen. The bad guys are not going to turn their guns in. Bob, we got a few callers waiting on the line. Why don't we take a few of your calls with Bob Irwin, former owner of the gun store, does a YouTube show weekly, and of course is the author of the book The Reality of Armed Self-Defense. The number to call if you want to be a part of the show, 257-5396. Again, 702-257-5396. Bob and I aren't going to agree on everything, but I certainly think we agree mental illness is a huge problem, and gun responsibility, which is what I talk about also, is a huge problem. Let's go to Gary. Gary, thanks for calling into the Vegas Take. What's on your mind?
Hey, as usual, I have a different opinion when there's gun control. First, you take the guns away, and then you take freedom of speech, and they make it they outlaw people like you calling people morons on the radio because it's hate speech. I mean,
calling someone a moron is not hate speech. I disagree.
Listen, I think that everybody should be given a gun automatically, no matter what, like an Obama phone if you can't afford one.
So you're saying if
Everybody
you can't
has a
hold on. You're saying if you're a felon and you can't afford a gun, you should be given a gun, Gary? That's ridiculous.
Yes.
Okay.
Not,
well, that's
not in prison.
that's
not a prisoner.
So
somebody
somebody who's murdered somebody who just got out of jail and served 20 years should be allowed to be given a gun for free. Is that what you're saying, Gary? You said just like an Obama phone. If you're a felon that got out of jail, you're allowed to get an Obama phone.
We have some common sense guidelines.
Well, I mean, I'm searching
for. They don't want to take care of the mentally ill.
Yeah,
we'll take care of the mentally ill. If you're so mental and you're causing disturbances out in public, somebody's going to shoot you, and that's the end of it. Okay.
All right. Well, okay, Gary, I appreciate your opinion, but I don't think any of us in studio agree that everyone should be given a gun for free. That's completely and utterly ridiculous. Let's go to John. John, thanks for calling into the Vegas Take. The number to call, by the way, 257-5396. John, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, John, you're on the air with us. What's up?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right. So you said that, you were going to see Bill and Hillary. Where are they at?
I was given a comp ticket. I'm about 50-50 on whether I'm going or not, to be completely honest with you. But I think they're going. I think it's going to be kind of boring. That's just my opinion. But I think they're going to.
Well, you know, I think that if you're going to go see that, then you shouldn't be given a gun because you got to be mentally ill.
So I don't know if you're making a joke or you're serious. Number one,
I'm being serious. Who in their right mind would want to go see that? So
let me just get this straight. Let me just get this straight, John. Okay. Uh-huh.
I mean, come on, man.
So you called in. So we're talking about. Okay, let's be real. We're talking about something very serious with Bob Irwin about gun control. Hold on a second. Don't interrupt me. Don't interrupt me. Let me finish.
Well, let me talk.
Well, I just did let you talk, and you said something really stupid. So now I'm going to talk, and you can listen, or I'm going to hang up on you.
Idiot.
Okay. Well, would you like me to hang up on you, or do you want to have a conversation? Yes or no, John? It's your call. Okay. Good. Good. Did he hang up the phone? Good. He's a coward. See, Bob, you see what I have to deal with? I have to deal with cowards. He calls into the show and says anybody that goes to see Bill and Hillary Clinton, what did he say? They're mentally ill. So because somebody disagrees with his political beliefs, they must be mentally ill. Here we are, Bob. We have someone in studio that is an expert when it comes to gun control, and it's a fascinating conversation, at least I think it is. And we have idiots that decide to call in and decide to bash Hillary and Bill Clinton. You can bash them all you want to. We're not talking about Hillary and Bill Clinton. We're talking about gun control. And the guy who called in, if you ask me, I think he's mentally ill. See, those are the kind of guys that shouldn't have a gun.
Back to the mentally ill thought process. Do you consider someone who looks themselves in the mirror and they're clearly anatomically a male, but they believe that they are a female? Do you believe they're mentally ill, Bob?
Well, that's a transgender question that I'm not sure Bob wants to answer.
I really don't profess to be an expert in psychology.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave that one alone. Let's take.
I think there's at least two of those already in the room, so I'm going to leave that one alone.
Bob's probably right about that.
Talk about gun issues.
Yes. 257-5396, the number to call, 702-257-5396. Go to Mike. Mike, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind, Mike?
Hey, thanks for having me. Hey,
Sure.
First I wanted to start off by saying usually I disagree with a lot of what you have to say, but today what you have to say is making sense. Yes, responsibility of gun owners and their children, especially how they're getting the guns, is one of the main issues. If a child gets your gun as a parent, you should be held liable.
Mm-hmm.
You should be able to keep the gun from your children, first of all.
Bob, hang on, Mike. Bob, do you agree with that? Because I do.
I agree with that to a large degree. I had a long conversation with our district attorney, Mr. Wolfson, about this very issue, face to face, when it came up, and he wanted to. I admire that he wanted to talk to me about it, because he was charging a parent that the child got a hold of a gun and the child shot himself. That's most common when little kids get a hold of a gun. They most commonly. Their first target is themselves. Their second target is their parents. The third target is another playmate, just statistically. And he said he wanted to charge the guy with a gross misdemeanor or felony and for child endangerment, so on and so on. And I said, here you have a parent who is sentenced to the worst rest of his life that could possibly happen, having caused the death of his own child through his negligence or what you would call his stupidity. And what are you going to do? You're going to put him in jail for a year? That he says, well, it'll warn other people not to do that. And I said, the problem is that parents who do that sort of thing don't read the law. They don't listen to talk radio. They don't listen to what the DA says in the news conference. It's not going to affect them.
I get what you're saying. It's kind of like if you're a drunk driver and you got the kid in your back seat, and then because of your irresponsibility, the kid dies in the back seat in a horrible crash. I do understand your point, but I kind of understand where Mike is coming from, too. There has to be accountability, right, Mike?
Exactly. So, I mean, and it's a tough one, that situation he just described. It's a really tough one. But when you put the shoe on the other foot with a different example, a car, if someone steals my car and they run someone over with it, I shouldn't be held responsible. But so it's a really, it's a thin line, and it's a really thick line when you think about it with the comparisons.
Well, that's a slightly different issue. What the issue we're talking about is if you leave the keys to your car and your child gets in the car and drives it.
Right.
Where's the responsibility?
Right.
Not if you're driving.
Does that make sense,
Follow what I'm
Mike?
saying? The misuse of the car versus misuse of the gun.
Right.
It does. But responsibility is the number one problem.
Hypothetically.
There should be more control. You need a license to drive a car. You should have a license or some kind of thing to own any kind of gun.
Mike, let me ask you a question. I want to ask Bob the same question. Hypothetically, let's just say that woman in Connecticut whose son committed that atrocious act, okay? And as we know, the mom was killed by her son. Let's just say that mom survived. Let's just say, do you think that mom deserved to be behind bars? Because my answer is yes. She taught her son how to shoot a gun, and he couldn't even have a conversation with somebody. He was mentally ill. He knew he had access to where the guns were. That mom, in my opinion, deserved to be in jail for a very long time. Would you both agree with that?
I would. That's an easy one because of the circumstances.
Right.
There are so many things wrong with what she did.
Yeah.
That's an easy one, yes. She should be in trouble.
Thank you for the call, Mike. I appreciate the call, Mike. Thank you. Bob, you agree with that?
In general, yes.
Yeah.
That would apply to her, but you're talking about a specific case.
Right.
What if there were 3 other children in the house and there were no grandparents and they're going to go into foster care? And
different circumstances, yeah. But on those circumstances.
The tiniest things change those cases dramatically.
No doubt. Number to call, 257-5396. Again, 702-257-5396. Let's try to squeeze in one other call here before we go to break. Dave, you're on with Bob Irwin. What's on your mind, Dave?
Yes, I would like to discuss I'm for some gun control, but not taking all the guns away.
Right.
Personally, I don't believe we've been following the Second Amendment because the first part of it says a well-regulated militia necessary to defend the state. So we should be having tough regulations to own guns, and we don't have that. And I do agree that when guns are taken from their parents or from somebody, they should be held accountable.
Yeah, I agree too, Dave. Bob, you agree with that?
Yes. Again, these cases every case is different. But in general, yes, it's really hard to make general statements without looking at...
It is. It's a case-by-case basis. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, I agreed with the assault weapons ban because that's not taking away all guns. It's just taking away assault weapons, which I know there's no definition for it, but, the AK-47, the guns that these guys like to use. But the Second Amendment does say a well-regulated militia necessary to defend the state. So we're supposed to have a well-regulated when it comes to guns, we're supposed to be well-regulated.
Yeah.
I believe we have been ignoring that part of the Second Amendment.
Hang on one second. The word regulated in that statement at the time meant practiced. The regulated militia meant they've gotten together and learned how to march and how to do the arms to me and how to hide behind the trees, tall guys behind the trees, short guys behind the rocks, that sort of thing. Right. It didn't mean regulation in the sense we use. It meant drilled and practiced. That people that have guns should know how to use them safely. Yep. The militia was every land-owning white male over the age of 21 and under 45 at the time. And we bent that around a little bit. I understand they let women have guns now. Is that true?
Yeah, as far as I know, they do. Yeah.
Yes, so we have bent that a bit here and there to account for some changes in our
But he brings up. I want to ask you about an AK-47 when we come back. We got to take a break. We're joined in studio by Bob Irwin, the author of the book "The Reality of Armed Self-Defense." Of course, former owner of the gun store. JD, you said you've never shot a gun before. I have shot.
That is correct.
I have shot an assault weapon before. In fact, it was in one of Bob's stores. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. We'll also take your phone calls. Continue to take your calls. We appreciate them at 257-5396. Don't worry, we will get to Trumpy coming up at the top of the hour. We will talk about Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin and his 1-hour phone conversation. So we're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this. Again, the phone number, 257-5396. Again, 257-5396, joined by Bob Irwin. We'll take a break. Be back right after this on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDWN. All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take, Sharp and Shapiro. Special guest Bob Irwin, former owner of the gun store, talking about gun rights, your thoughts on guns. We got a few phone calls we will get to, and then I want to explain to me personally why I'm not really a gun guy. JD is not either, and then Bob is going to tell us why we're wrong. So we'll get to that. Your phone calls at 257-5396. Again, 702-257-5396. Look, Kamala Harris, if she wants to get rid of every gun on the street, she's an idiot for saying that. I disagree with Bernie Sanders saying that all felons should vote. We were just talking about that in the break. But then I said there's also some nut jobs on the right, a few people that call into this show that think that felons should be allowed to have guns. Felons should not only not be allowed to have guns, they should not be allowed to vote, period. It should be end of discussion. Again, the number to call, 257-5396. Take your thoughts on that and, of course, gun control issues. Let's start off this conversation with Greg. Greg, thanks for calling into the Vegas Take. What's on your mind, Greg?
Yeah, I kind of agree with one of the callers earlier that made the analogy of, driving and getting a license and taking a test for getting your privileged license to drive. I think it should be the same way as a gun. You should take a test, a written test. A rifle can shoot a bullet a mile, a shotgun goes 50 feet, always travel with the safety on, never point a gun at anyone other than up in the air, those type of simple common sense things. And, much like a car, when you have to register it and owe money for the registration or the license plate or whatever, if you charged everyone that wanted a gun $5 or $10, I think that would be a pretty good way to be able to support, the testing and people that you would have to employ to do the testing, whether it be written or a field gun test. I'll never forget when I was young, probably 21, 22, my girlfriend was fascinated with my shotgun, and I didn't describe anything to her and the kick or anything, and she shot the gun, and the gun kicked out of her hands.
Wow.
So there's a perfect example of, teaching people.
That's a good point, Greg. That's a good point, Greg. I want to let Bob respond to this, and I appreciate the call, Greg. Thank you much. And by the way, I don't necessarily disagree with you. Bob, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm not sure that giving a shotgun to a presumably fairly lightweight female and not telling her it's going to kick
that's probably not a good idea.
A very poor handling of guns, and it's a very poor way to teach people about guns.
Not safe.
It's not safe, and she's going to develop right then a flinch that she's never going to want to touch a gun again. However, the The problem comes back to the comparison to driving a car. You have to take a test. You have to test drive and so on and so on. We don't have a constitutional amendment that says you're free, all citizens are allowed to drive a car. And if they're adult males or whatever the restrictions are written into that part of the militia, that they're allowed to have a car. The Second Amendment stands on its own. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, you may want to argue we should change the Constitution, get rid of that, get rid of the Electoral College, whatever else it is. But the Second Amendment and the First Amendment are kind of tied together. And the Fifth Amendment, the right to a lawyer, the right to be confronted by your accuser, all sorts of rights are built into the Constitution. And to change that, being as the United States has become the most successful, richest, everybody wants to move here, the Constitution works. We have bent it slightly here and there with court decisions, but the Second Amendment is in the Constitution. It's the guts of our country.
Sure, and I certainly don't want to take away the Second Amendment. We have a few more people waiting to ask some questions and comments on gun control. Let's take those calls at 257-5396. Go to Pat. Pat, thanks for waiting patiently on hold. How are you?
Hey, good. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay. Hey, I'm a real big fan. Listen to you every day, see what's going on.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate that.
This is kind of embarrassing. Back in like 95, I had a domestic violence. It's only a misdemeanor. I gave up my right way back then to have or buy a gun. You know, the first 10 years, I'm like, I wish I could go buy a gun or have a gun. You know, then the stuff started happening. The nightmares, the school shootings, and little girls getting shot. I don't want a gun. I don't need a gun. And either do any people, you know, even misdemeanor charges.
Yeah.
What else can we do? It's a nightmare. I can't think of anything.
I can tell you this, Pat. I'm with you, except because we were going to get to this. I'm not a big gun guy, but I'll tell you this for sure, Pat. And by the way, I appreciate the call. If I lived in a really horrible area, Bob, and I had no choice but living in a high crime rate area, and I didn't know if my place was going to be robbed. Look, we all know anything bad can happen anywhere at any time. I get that. I'd like to think I live in a pretty nice area, but if I lived in a really poor area, no doubt about it, I would probably own one or two guns. I would have one in my car, and I would have one in my house, and I would be responsible. JD, correct me if I'm wrong here. You live in a nice area as well. Again, anything bad could happen at any time. I'm not saying that, but very low chance if you're living in a nice area. I choose not to own a gun. JD, do you agree with that?
Yeah. Guns, for me, it's the finalization. It's the fact that you can have a long, illustrious life, and one shot to the wrong part of your body, and your life ends, and you are dead.
Right.
And to me, that's scary.
It is scary. There's no doubt about it. But in Bob's defense, and we're talking about defense, if somebody comes into your house and is threatening to kill your family or rob
totally
you,
understand that.
let me tell you something.
But no, if I lived on near Nellis, or on the Boulder Highway or something like that, I would be much more apt to consider purchasing a gun.
I don't care if it's a 16-year-old or an 86-year-old. If somebody breaks into my place, I am going to shoot them because I feel threatened. I don't know if they have a weapon on them. They're a stranger, and I know, Bob, you agree on that. Let's ask some more questions for Bob, if that's all right.
Well, I don't actually agree with that.
No?
If they're a 16-year-old and it's daylight, and
if I know for sure they don't have a gun, that's different. But I don't know
for
that.
sure, so you find out if they have a gun by opening fire? How about yelling, "Get out of my house" first?
And what if they turn around and shoot you then?
That's the risk you take. I can't imagine. I have people say that I had a person call in my other shows that insisted, and this had a gun show, and he came up with me and said, if somebody comes in my house and they're not allowed there, I'm going to shoot them. And I said, if you learn nothing from anybody you talk to, never say that to anyone else in your whole life.
You have to feel threatened.
And he said, I don't care if it's a damn 9-year-old. I'm going to blow him away.
Yeah, that's a little overboard, and maybe I was a little overboard with my statements.
You had a 16-year-old. How about a 15-year-old? How about a 17-year-old?
Depends on the circumstance.
How about you save your defense lawyers
get out of my house
a ton of time by yelling, "Get out of my house," And if he does anything but that, you're already pointing your gun at him, right?
Right.
So who wins the fight?
Fair enough. That's a legitimate
and
argument.
And you say that while you're hiding behind your couch.
Fair argument. I understand that. Let's take
there
some
are ways to get around that.
No, fair argument. I don't disagree with you. Let's go to Steve. Okay. Steve, thanks for calling into the Vegas Take. You're on with Bob Irwin. How are you?
Hi, guys. Bob, I listened to you before, and Brian and JD, I really enjoy what you guys have to say. You have a very interesting conversation. Let me ask Bob this. I never owned a weapon. Many times I've seen this on TV where someone's life is actually saved. Some criminal with an automatic weapon, the gun jams. The percentage of guns that jam, is that A, based on the quality of the firearm, or B, the operator? I've seen it happen so many times, and some people unfortunately died because of that, the gun jamming, automatic weapons.
Good question.
Is that a common thing?
It's a common thing. It's generally caused by the shooter's unfamiliarity with the gun. They're not automatics. They're not holding the pistol tight enough so the slide doesn't cycle all the way. Occasionally, it's a gun malfunction. Any modern handgun, not talking Saturday Night Special you bought for $39 on the web,
right?
But any major brand handgun works today by today's standards anytime. If you buy a gun somewhere and you're not sure, take it to a gunsmith and have them check it.
Yeah.
Because if you need it, it's going to be a life-threatening situation. Make sure it works. That's
good question and a good answer. Let's take some more phone calls at 257-5396. Let's go to Marge. Marge, thanks for calling in. How are you, Marge?
I'm good, and I've listened to Bob on prior radio stations that he had, and he always did a great job. So I welcome him tonight. I'll tell you a personal story.
Sure.
I always said I was never going to deal with guns. I'm scared of them. The police will always be around, et cetera, until one night. And all of a sudden there was pounding on the door, doorbells were ringing. It was a pretty chaotic situation. Subsequently, I found out there were 3 guys at my door. They were trying to broach the door. I was on the phone with the police. The 911 operator fortunately stayed on until the police got here, and they were about 5 to 10 minutes away from the house. But it's that adage about, when you need the police, they're only minutes away. And in all of that, I felt so vulnerable. I thought to myself, I'll never have that happen to me again. And so I thought, okay, so I drive a car. I have to understand how to drive a car. And you take tests for that. And I kind of approached this whole thing with a gun. I don't know anything about guns. I'm going to go get, educated on them. Took, classes as far as how to handle a gun, what to do with them, et cetera, got qualified, and figured out what I wanted. And I finally, I think the first night that I finally got some decent sleep was the night that the gun was with me. I say that as a story to people who think, well, I live in a great area.
Right,
I don't need anything, blah,
I know
blah,
what
blah.
you mean, yep.
But, waiting on that phone with a 911 operator for that 5 or 10 minutes,
scary.
That was one of the scariest things in my life. So
I'm glad you told that story, Marge, and I want to hear Bob respond to that. And I actually have a very similar story. Bob, what do you think about that?
She's absolutely correct in what she said. And the average response time, by the time you call 911 and the officer arrives here in the middle of Las Vegas, is just under 8 minutes. Think of 8 minutes when a guy's crashing through your door.
I had a situation, too, that happened to me a couple of years ago.
You need self-defense capability now.
I had a situation that happened to me a couple of years ago, Bob, and maybe you could help me with the law on this and what I was able to or not be able to do. At the time, I'm dating a girl who lived in a complex who I'd never been to before. I was looking for a parking spot, and I found a parking spot, and I didn't take anybody's spot, by the way. Guy right behind me in a truck pulls up to my bumper, and I'm like, oh, well, what's going on here? He comes out with a baseball bat. Now, he's got his baseball bat like he's going to hit me, and he's speaking in another language. He was speaking Spanish, and I didn't understand what he was saying. I looked at his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot red. He was either drunk or on something, and he was yelling at me. And I'm like, what is this guy's problem? I'm putting my hands up, and I'm like, whoa, calm down. 10 seconds go by, and if the guy lunges at me, if I had a gun, I would have shot him. And I'm going to tell you right now, I wouldn't have felt bad about it at all, because I would have said he doesn't deserve to be alive if he's going to assault somebody for no reason. Now, he didn't lunge at me, but it's certainly he was 3 or 4 feet away from me, and if he hits me with that baseball bat, I could die. I could lose my life or be seriously injured. Even though he didn't lunge at me, I certainly felt like my life was in jeopardy in that moment. If I had had a gun on me at that time, and if I had shot him, would I have been in the right?
You would have been legally correct. That doesn't prevent his family from suing you, et cetera, you know. But yeah, if someone is aggressively towards you with a baseball bat and yelling something you can't understand,
right?
That's very reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
What you want to do is call 911 right now, put the gun away, and when the police come, say, "I'd like to talk to an attorney." Thank you. That's it.
So even if I gave the description, so you would advise somebody like me, if I was in that situation, to not say anything to the police of what happened?
That's the short version. The long version is you say, I'm Fred Smith. Here's my driver's license. The gun I put away, it's over in my car because I didn't want to have it in my hand when you walked up. And I don't know this guy. I just pulled in here, and he came at me with a bat.
Right.
Now,
don't get me wrong.
I'd like to talk to an attorney.
Gotcha. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? There are plenty of instances where if somebody had a gun on them, just that shooting over the weekend at the school, if somebody had a gun, maybe some lives would have been saved. Maybe just the shooter would have died, which would have been a much better outcome. I think we all could agree on that. But in that situation, if I had had a gun, I'm telling you right now, Bob, I would have shot him and I would have killed him. Now, while there are many instances where if people had guns, lives would have been saved, that's a situation where I didn't have a gun, I didn't shoot him, that guy's still alive, and it probably saved me a lot of grief and a lot of issues.
I'd back you up with one part of your statement. Was your intent in having the gun to kill the guy?
Self-defense.
Your defense, your reason for having the gun, if I'm not mistaken, is to prevent him from killing you.
Correct.
You didn't have the gun with you to kill somebody.
Well, no.
You had
the reason why I would buy a gun
is to prevent you being killed.
Of course. The reason why I would buy a gun would not be to kill somebody. It'd be to protect myself. Obviously.
You just said that earlier.
Yeah.
I'd have killed him. But
well, I'm saying if I was in that position and I had a gun legally, I can tell you right now without the shadow of a doubt, I would have shot him. Now, whether that killed him or not, don't know. To be honest with you, don't really care. If somebody is dumb enough to go after a stranger with a baseball bat for no reason, whether they're drunk or high or whatever, I don't think they should be in society as far as I'm concerned. And I don't feel sorry for them if they're in that situation and they're shot.
All right, let's
that guy is a dummy and a criminal probably.
Let's flip the script. Say the same guy is approaching you. He doesn't have a baseball bat, but he's 6'6", 290 pounds.
Mm-hmm. If he lunges at me and let's go back to George Zimmerman, and I hate to defend Zimmerman, okay, because I think he is just a complete idiot.
Let's just say he's physically superior.
Okay, I take the side of Zimmerman. Now, Zimmerman should have not followed Trayvon Martin, but who committed the first crime? According to the evidence, okay, Trayvon Martin is the one that physically assaulted Zimmerman. Now, you can make the argument Zimmerman should have never followed him. Fine, you're probably right, and that wouldn't have happened, but Zimmerman wasn't breaking the law. You're allowed to walk after somebody, okay?
Especially being he was the neighborhood watch guy.
Exactly.
Of course.
And Trayvon Martin is on top of him, putting his head into the pavement, okay? I think Zimmerman was in the right. Now, Zimmerman, based on his history, he's a complete Nimrod. He is a moron. And if he got involuntary manslaughter, I probably wouldn't feel sorry for him. They were not going to get second-degree murder. They never were in that case. Now, I think Zimmerman was within his rights to shoot that kid, and it's a horrible, horrible situation. That kid, Trayvon Martin, was scared. While I understand his situation, he's got some stranger following him. Unfortunately, he took to physical violence, and it's a horrible thing. It's terrible. I wish it never happened. I wish Zimmerman never followed that kid, but that's the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is if somebody is, I hate to use the term dumb because Trayvon Martin was a very young kid and he was scared. I'm not going to say he was dumb, but if any adult comes at you with a baseball bat, like in my situation, they're dumb, and I don't know them. I don't know what they're doing, and I feel threatened. You're damn right I'm going to shoot my weapon. You're damn right I'm going to do that. I'd rather be him than me.
Right, but what if they come at you with no weapon? They're just capable of hurting you.
I think, like what Bob said, I think every situation is different. right, Bob? Every situation's different.
They are. It depends on all the details, the height, weight, distance. If one guy a karate expert, the other guy isn't, and so forth and so on.
Which you wouldn't know.
This is something we run into in court cases all the time when the attorney on one side says, well, hypothetically, if the guy did this.
Right.
And my answer always is, can you be more specific on the hypothetical?
Right.
Height, weight, weapon, aggression level, Is he snarling? Has he filed his teeth to a point? Has he got a tattoo of a swastika in the middle of his forehead? Those are all things you read that increases your risk from this guy.
Right.
And the details are what matter. And that's why we try and slow everything down. And where we slow them down is yelling warnings.
We got to take a quick break, Bob. We are going to get to politics next. I don't know if you want to stick around for that. I know that's not really your forte, but you're more than welcome to, Bob, if you would like. I'll leave that completely and totally up to you.
We'll give it a try.
All right, we'll give it a try,
happens.
Bob.
If it's
good.
Gun politics.
All right. Bob Irwin joining us in studio. JD, I know you want to comment on what Bob just said. We'll get to that on the other side of the break because I got to take a quick break. Number to call, 257-5396. Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump talking on the phone for an hour today. You're not going to believe what Donald Trump did not bring up. We'll get to that coming up next. You're listening to The Vegas Take on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDWN.